A former Ukrainian defense minister's call for elections tests how long martial law can suspend normal democratic processes during an active war. This is Omni View, episode 148. Mikhailo Fedorov, who served as defense minister until recently, publicly called for presidential elections to resume despite the ongoing conflict with Russia. Martial law has been in force since February 2022, which under Ukrainian law suspends elections for the duration. The statement comes as the country continues to face Russian attacks and manages its wartime governance. Fedorov argued that Kyiv must restore its democratic process even while the war continues. The call directly challenges the current suspension that has kept President Zelensky in office beyond the original term. Ukrainian authorities have maintained that holding national votes while large parts of the country remain under threat would be logistically impossible and potentially unsafe for voters and candidates. Opposition voices, including the former minister, argue that prolonged suspension of elections risks concentrating power without sufficient checks, even during conflict. International observers have noted that many democracies have adjusted electoral rules during wars, yet Ukraine's specific constitutional provisions tie the suspension directly to the declaration of martial law. The debate centers on balancing security needs against the requirement for periodic renewal of political legitimacy. BBC reporting highlights the legal barrier created by martial law, while CNBC coverage focuses on the challenge this poses to Zelensky's wartime authority. The strongest argument for resuming elections rests on the principle that democratic legitimacy must be renewed through regular votes, even in wartime, because indefinite suspension of the electoral calendar can erode public trust and allow unchecked executive power to accumulate. Advocates of this view, including former Defense Minister Fedorov, point to the constitutional requirement that elections resume once the legal trigger of martial law is addressed. The strongest argument against immediate elections rests on the practical reality that large areas of territory remain under active threat or occupation, making safe and fair voting impossible without endangering citizens or producing results that lack credibility across divided regions. Officials aligned with the current government emphasize that the Constitution itself provides for this suspension precisely to avoid such risks during declared states of emergency. Parliament or the Constitutional Court may issue a formal response to the call for elections before the end of the year. Shifting now to Southeast Asia, Thailand welcomed the head of Myanmar's military government for meetings aimed at strengthening ties between the two countries. The visit focused on border security, trade routes, and regional stability amid Myanmar's ongoing internal conflict. Thai officials hosted the Myanmar military chief in a move that deepens existing bilateral cooperation on shared concerns. The engagement occurred as Myanmar continues to experience civil strife that affects neighboring states. Thai officials have framed the engagement as necessary for managing shared borders and preventing spillover from Myanmar's civil strife. Regional analysts point out that Thailand has historically maintained pragmatic relations with Myanmar's leadership, regardless of who holds power in Naypyidaw. Critics within ASEAN have questioned whether such high-level contact lends legitimacy to the military government at a time when many member states prefer distance. Nikkei Asia reporting details the stated goals of border management and trade while noting the broader regional context of Myanmar's crisis. The approach reflects Thailand's long-standing preference for direct engagement over isolation. Observers will watch for any joint statements on border management or refugee returns in the coming weeks. Moving to developments in African finance. The South African bank Absa reported stronger first-half earnings and said it is studying conversion of its Nigeria representative office into a merchant bank while exploring opportunities in Uganda, Zambia, Tanzania, and Angola. Net income for the first half reached 12.58 billion rand, compared with 11.23 billion rand a year earlier. Chief Executive Officer Kenny Fila outlined the expansion steps after the earnings release. The moves target markets where the group sees growth potential beyond its South African base. Absa executives have described the moves as part of a deliberate return to a broader African footprint after earlier retrenchment. Local regulators in target countries will ultimately decide whether the proposed structures meet licensing standards. Some African financial analysts note that regional banks face competition from both international players and fast-growing local institutions. Bloomberg coverage includes direct comments from the CEO on the strategy and the specific countries under review. The earnings improvement provides the financial headroom for these steps. The outcome of the Nigeria licensing discussion will indicate how quickly the expansion can proceed. Turning to European industry, Italy's space sector, built around many small and medium-sized firms with specialized engineering skills, is being asked to scale up as European governments increase defense and space spending. The industry remains dominated by these smaller companies despite its niche expertise. European defense planners seek suppliers capable of meeting larger production targets. The shift comes as overall European space and defense budgets rise. Italian government officials argue that the country's niche expertise can contribute meaningfully to larger European projects if companies combine resources. Industry representatives have warned that forced mergers could erode the very specialization that gives Italian firms an edge. European defense planners, meanwhile, are seeking fewer but larger suppliers capable of meeting ambitious production targets. Japan Times reporting examines the structural mismatch between Italy's fragmented sector and the scale requirements of current European programs. The tension highlights differing priorities between preserving specialized capabilities and achieving industrial consolidation. Any government-backed consolidation proposals or new joint European contracts involving Italian firms will draw attention in the months ahead. Now for the economy and technology beat. Japan's major listed firms increased their combined profit forecast for the current fiscal year, projecting a 14% rise driven largely by strong sales in artificial intelligence and chip-related businesses. The upgrade reflects sustained global demand for advanced components used in data centers and electronics. Several large Japanese groups have benefited from customers diversifying away from other Asian production hubs. Corporate reports tie the improved outlook directly to these technology segments. Corporate reports attribute the upgrade to sustained global demand for advanced components used in data centers and electronics. Some Japanese economists caution that reliance on a narrow set of technology exports leaves earnings vulnerable to shifts in overseas investment cycles. Nikkei Asia aggregates the company forecasts and highlights the role of AI and semiconductor demand. The revision marks a notable upward adjustment from earlier projections. The next quarterly earnings revisions will show whether the AI-driven momentum continues. In India, firms posted profit increases at the fastest pace in 3 years, even as global conflicts raised input costs for some sectors. Company filings show broad-based gains across manufacturing, services, and technology exporters. The growth rate marks the strongest performance since the post-pandemic recovery period. Currency movements and commodity prices remain variables that could affect future results. Analysts at Indian brokerages link the result to steady domestic demand and successful cost management. External observers note that currency movements and commodity prices remain variables that could affect the next reporting period. Nikkei Asia summarizes the earnings trends and notes the resilience despite external shocks from ongoing conflicts. The outcome demonstrates that domestic factors can offset some international pressures. The upcoming quarterly results will reveal whether the growth rate holds. Now, some progress worth knowing about. LG Energy Solution has begun operations at a new battery manufacturing facility in the United States that will supply cells to both Toyota and Tesla. The plant adds domestic production capacity for electric vehicle batteries at a time when U.S. automakers are scaling up electric models. The investment responds directly to customer requirements for localized supply chains. U.S. trade policy continues to favor North American battery production through tax credits and content rules. The company has described the investment as a direct response to customer requirements for localized supply. U.S. industry participants acknowledge that building and qualifying new plants at this scale remains technically demanding and capital-intensive. Nikkei Asia reports on the facility opening and its specific customers. The development adds concrete manufacturing capacity in a key growth sector. Production volumes from the new site will be tracked against announced targets for the coming year. Now, to really understand this story, there is something most coverage leaves out. Most coverage assumes elections are simply postponed by practical difficulties. Yet Ukraine's constitution contains an explicit clause that ties the suspension of national votes directly to the legal state of martial law. Under that framework, the president and parliament remain in office until the law is lifted, creating a built-in mechanism that prevents scheduled elections without needing separate legislation each time. The same rules have been applied in earlier periods of conflict, showing that the current arrangement follows an established constitutional path rather than an ad hoc decision. Because the clause is automatic, any move to restore elections requires either ending martial law or amending the constitution, both of which carry their own procedural thresholds. Knowing this distinction helps readers separate logistical arguments from the legal trigger that actually keeps the electoral calendar frozen. When officials or critics discuss holding elections during war, the key test is whether they are addressing the constitutional bar or only the security and organizational obstacles. Readers can check the text of Ukraine's martial law statute and the relevant constitutional articles to see exactly which provisions are active and what would be required to lift them. The mechanism also means that lifting martial law would automatically reopen the electoral timeline, shifting the focus from security logistics alone to the broader political decision of ending the emergency declaration. Historical application during prior conflicts demonstrates that the suspension has operated as a standard constitutional response rather than a unique wartime exception. If you want to go deeper on the Ukrainian elections debate, compare how BBC and CNBC are covering it. You will see two different frames on the same facts. Tomorrow, watch for the outcome of the Nigeria licensing discussion for Absa Bank. That's Omni View. The news can feel heavy, but understanding what's actually happening and what's being done about it beats doom scrolling every time. Stay curious, pick one story from today and read it from a second outlet you don't usually open. If balanced perspectives are valuable to you, share this with a friend and subscribe wherever you listen. See you tomorrow, and if you'd rather watch than listen, find us on YouTube at Nera Network. Links in the show notes. And before you go, this show is part of the Nera Network, a family of daily podcasts on tech, science, and markets, each one a short, sharp briefing you can finish on the commute. If today earned its place in your feed, here's your next listen. Tesla Shorts Time, your daily deep dive into everything Tesla. Find every show free at neranetwork.com. And on the website, every episode's visuals live in our free image gallery at neranetwork.com/gallery. Royalty free under Creative Commons. Download with attribution. This episode used AI voice synthesis of my voice. Editorial selection and analysis are my own.